Hello and welcome to the channel. In this episode, we'll be continuing on with our tutorial of Fjord Serpents, Vikings at War. Last video, we looked at the wit phase of a turn, which was the wind, initiative, and target number. In this phase, we'll be looking at the ship phase. So this is the second part of a turn. Within the ship phase, there are two parts. Both parts are identical and allow each ship within the game to move. Starting the first part of the turn with the player who won the ship initiative choosing a ship and moving it, followed by his opponent, and then alternating until all ships have moved. Following this part, you repeat the process again, starting with the player that won initiative and alternating between the opponent until all ships have moved. As far as movement goes within Fjord Serpents, ships have access to these rulers to indicate how they move on the table of play. Now, depending on the speed of the ship and its current movement, will indicate what rulers they have available for them to move. In this example here, I have a ship which is under oar, represented by its furled sail. This ship here is under sail and could either be at half speed or at full speed. They are the three movement types within Fjord Serpents, Vikings at War. A ship that is at rowing speed or that it is at half sail will have access to all three of these rulers. That includes straight movement, gradual turns, and sharp turns. A ship that is currently moving under full sail will only have access to two of these rulers, and that will be straight forward and the partial turn. To move a ship, you can use any combination of the rulers that you have once each. An example of this is if this Carvey longship can row 4 and is under rowing speed, I have a number of options to me. I can either move it straight forward 4, or I could do either a partial or a full turn within its phase, followed either by itself, which can go up to 4, or I could use a combination of these two rulers. So for example, I could go 2, and then I could move it straight forward 2 as well to complete its turn. Important thing to remember is that when measuring with tools and rulers, what you want to do is where the keel touches the water, it lines up on the ship and at a 90-degree angle to the keel of the ship. So this is at a 90-degree angle, and then the ship, as you move it, will move accordingly around the ruler on the angle indicated. Important notes to remember with ship movement is that once per game turn, a ship may go up or down one movement type or speed that it has. It can do this in any of the two phases that it moves within that turn, but it must indicate before the phase starts of that movement that it is going to do so. And by going up or down, you can change. So right from the bottom, we have rowing speed. That then changes to half sail, and then that changes to full sail. So you can go up or down accordingly between those in ascending, descending manner. So from full sail, I could go to half sail. From half sail, I could either go back to full sail or I could go down to rowing speed. All of these speeds and movement types really affect the way the game is played and the options that you have available to your movement and any collisions and things that are going to happen within that turn. Now, collisions are any time your vessel touches any part of a terrain piece or any part of an opponent's ship. A lot of the times these could be deliberate attempts to try and board, but sometimes you find yourself in a position where you can't escape. And an example of this would be, in this instance, this ship is at half sail and moving at 4. Now, it wants to get to the enemy, but the problem here is if it was to do a gradual turn or a partial turn, the ship would find itself touching this part of this terrain piece. This being a tree slide obstacle means that trees have fallen from the fjords, and they're all in the water there, so it's quite dangerous to ships to go through this terrain. Then this ship would then suffer damage, and we will cover collisions in another video, but then it would suffer the collision damage from this. Now, not being a solid or removable piece of terrain, this ship could continue to move through this. Say this was its first turn, it would take the damage. If it could then clear this on the second turn, it might go to full sail, knowing well that it's, in a bit of a bad spot. So what it could do there is a turn followed by a movement and get itself out of that danger. But in the phase that it touches it, it takes the damage and any effects of this terrain. The next type of collision that can happen within the game itself is when ships collide with other ships. This can either be deliberate or it can be an accident. So in the previous example, this ship was moving at half sail, so we may as well stay there. And as you can see, anywhere that this ship is going to move forward, and it has to because it's under oar, it's going to be in a lot of trouble. If it was to go this way, it could almost skim in side by side on this ship and not have a problem. But for example's sake, let's have a look at what would happen if it did collide and where it collided. So when you collide with a ship, you want to break the ship up into 3 sections. So this middle section and just equal sections of the ship. Anywhere that ship gets hit, that'll be the spot. So within those 3 sections, that'll be the spot that we indicate any drift or movement from. So for example, if we were just going to go up the guts with a whole bunch of smoke here, and this ship was just wanting to go straight forward, it would collide with the enemy ship there. Now, as I stated before, we will go through collisions and damage as a separate video, but just for now in the ship phase, before that damage is applied, we'll show how this works. So this ship is under sail and has collided with the side of a ship. This is a very dangerous situation for both ships, and both will take damage from this scenario. But just from a movement point of view, what we would do after this collision is we'd roll a d3. In this instance, we have a 3. And because this ship has been hit on the front section, it is going to turn inwards in the direction of this ship. So this ship here is facing this way. And what's going to happen is this ship is going to go 1, 2, 3. And this ship is going to move with it and conform to that side, just as it naturally would. This is between you and the player, it just naturally conforms. Normally, if this was a boarding action, crew could then grapple from this ship, could then grapple this one because it's indicated that they were ready for this. The problem was moving with sail, you will take a lot more damage than if you were rowing towards an enemy. So normally, Viking ships are very, I suppose you'd call them delicate. They weren't really designed for ramming. So they are very vulnerable. And that's another tactic within this game, is to try and sink each other, or to push each other into bad terrain or up against rocks and sink the opponent's ship without having to fight them, which is a good thing. But in this instance, that's how that works. Now, if we go back again and reset this slightly, if this ship was to hit solid in the middle, then the 3 inches it moved on that roll would bring it straight back. Boom. So you could imagine if this ship hit, it would be like bang, and then it would settle again. Okay? So these are the things. And then alternatively, if you hit at the back, it's going to turn that way and twist, and the ship will go with it. This just indicates natural collisions on a waterway. And just as a final example for like a type of collision that could happen, which is different again, is in the previous example, this ship was at sail and it pushed into the other ship, and they both would have taken damage. This is another situation altogether. So in this could actually be a tactical ploy right here to damage this ship, because we have a solid immovable structure here being a scary rock. We have a ship that's very close to it, and we have a ship coming at it under sail. So you could just go gung-ho, balls to the wall over here, and say the ship was going to do its full movement forward and collide. What you'd want to do here is perhaps collide with the front section of this ship, because upon doing so and hitting it there, you would roll a d3. In this case, we've got a 3 again, which would then drive this ship into where any part of this, even the water that it touches, is a collision. So basically, it's getting hit and then bouncing its prow off a solid rock structure and then getting crunched by this ship. So you could imagine the physical, impact that this would create. And in this situation, and as I said, we'll go through the collisions and damage itself in another video, because it's actually quite a big part of this game and needs its own video. This ship would take damage from the initial collision between these two. This ship would take damage from this, and it would also take damage from this. That's very important too. In other situations where you have multiple ships, you can actually hit a ship and knock it into another ship as well. So you might be able to hit two of an opponent's ships within one turn if you can move it far enough into that ship, which creates like this sort of dodgem cars or bumper cars, whatever people call it around the world, sort of situation where you're bouncing off things and taking multiple damage because of it, which is really interesting and sort of really fun and dynamic as well within the game. So just to quickly go over this and just to tie it all together, I'll just do a very fast example of ship movement and the ship phase within the turn itself in both parts. So in this example, this ship has the initiative for ships and this one doesn't. So what we're going to do, it is at half sail like it was previously. It can either choose to partially move, it can move forward, or it can use a combination of these two. Or it could use a sharp turn since it's at half movement as well. So depends what we're looking for here. These guys have javelins and these guys have archers. So they probably want to close with each other, and they have berserks as well. So it's a bit more an offensive kind of ship, this one, which wants to close with the enemy, where this one might be able to hit more at range. So it's going to try its hardest to get in as close as it can to the enemy. So what we might do here to get an advantage and try and come around, we don't want to go too close to this. So this ship might just opt in this turn to go 1, 2, 3, 4 forward within that phase. So that then immediately switches it to this ship, which is under oar at the moment, and can choose where it wants to go. It can use all three of the rulers and a combination of them. Now, it's in a situation here where it may not be able to turn sharp enough to escape. And this puts the ship at a bit of a disadvantage of turning in this direction. Now, with a partial turn, you're going to have an even worse problem. You're going to have to go through this tree slide, which is going to cause damage to the hull. And same with the straightforward movement. So the options of this ship are limited. If it's trying to avoid the enemy, like say it had taken like half damage, like most of these crew were dead and it just wanted to get away, you might have to just brave it and pull through this tree slide. But in this instance, what it's going to do is a partial turn, and it's going to bring itself up beside the enemy here. And that would be its 4 inches of rowing movement for a carvy longship. Now the second part of the ship phase would then begin. So following on in the second part of the ship phase, this ship still has the initiative. What it chooses to do is go to rowing. So what it does is it switches a sail and it goes to rowing speed. And that's to get a bit more maneuverable and to take a little bit less damage. And it's aiming, in this instance, to do a full 90-degree turn. As you can see, it hasn't impacted the enemy. And what's going to happen now is we switch over to the enemy's turn. Now, being a little bit sly, what the enemy's going to do is to get into arrow range. So they're sort of twisting around each other here. So they're rowing in circles. And that ends there. So that would complete the ship phase. But any part of this ship, as long as it can see, draw to the side of the mast here, is within range with arrow fire. So these have a range of 4 inches. So that's to there. So any part of this ship, so that's probably the closest there, to the mast of the enemy ship is within range. So that these guys would be able to shoot with bows this turn, where these guys don't have enough range to be able to shoot back. So that's like a strategy, I guess you'd say. Like you want to try and pepper them with arrows before you actually engage, because these guys seem to have a stronger contingent of troops in a fence. So just a little tactic there, and that would complete the ship phase of that turn. So there you have the ship phase of a turn. It's very exciting and dynamic kind of turn, and it's really where all the maneuvering and actions come from so that you can get into combat, and it makes a massive difference to the overall effect of the game. Positioning of ships, how you collide with people, where you collide into them, what you push them into, is really a game in itself. And next video, what we'll be doing is we'll be going through the crew phase. So this is the fighting phase, and it's quite a big one. So stay tuned for that.